Welcome to the Small Business Matters podcast, where we talk to business experts and go beyond the trends to find out what's working for small businesses on Main Street and online. Now, let's get down to Main Street. Well, welcome back to Small Business Matters. Today we're exploring the power of podcasting as a tool for business development. With over 100 million people listening to podcasts each month in the US alone, the medium has seen exponential growth, presenting a unique opportunity for businesses to expand their reach and deepen customer engagement. And joining us to deep dive into this topic is Molly Ruland, CEO and founder of Heartcast Media. Molly has been pioneering in the podcast production field for over 2 decades, steering her company to become a leader in crafting top-tier content for a diverse client roster that includes the Department of Health, DC government, NATO, and even former NBA players. Under Molly's leadership, Heartcast Media has mastered the art of using podcasts not just for marketing, but as a strategic tool to boost revenue and build lasting relationships. Now, operating from her scenic base next to a volcano in Costa Rica, Molly embodies her philosophy that listening is the revolution, driving forward with passion and innovation. Molly, welcome to the Small Business Matters podcast.
Thank you so much. That was a fantastic introduction. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome, and we're glad to have you with us. So for businesses looking to drive into podcasting, what are the first steps that they should take to effectively use podcasts as a tool for business development?
Well, I think it's really important to be crystal clear on what the goal is, right? What does success really look like? What do you hope to accomplish with a podcast? Because visibility and sales, right, are 2 very different things. If you're just looking for thought leadership and visibility, then you're going to drive it in one direction. If you're looking to fill your pipeline and get in front of more people that you want to do business with, right, not just who you want to know about your business, but who you actually want to work with, that's a very different goal. So I think identifying what success looks like, what is that metric for defining success, and then creating a clear path on how to get there.
So as a small business owner yourself, I'm sure you can understand why some business owners might feel that podcasting presents a heavy time burden. How do you convince them that the time is worth it and that there are ways to podcast when you're very busy running a business?
Well, the first thing I do is talk people off the ledge of trying to produce it themselves. And I think that's the biggest misnomer. It's, I was thinking about it this morning before our call, and I was thinking, you would never tell a business owner, listen, just learn how to build a basic website, and then just learn how to make basic graphics, and then just learn copywriting and slap something up and see if people like it. And then if you get any clients, then invest in your business. No one would ever say that to a business owner, right? You would never encourage somebody to try to wear so many different hats that they have zero experience in. But for some reason in podcasting, it's expected for a podcaster or business owner to know what recording software to use, know how to edit that content, know how to make the graphics, know how to make the copy, in addition to understanding the value of that relationship, who they're interviewing and why, how they're setting the expectations, are they doing any follow-up? It's like all the focus is put on production. Well, I think that's a giant disservice to anybody who's looking to do a podcast. Your focus should be on your business. Hire somebody to outsource it. And then it's not a huge time suck at all. It's very limited because all you're doing is focusing on who are you interviewing and why, doing the research on them like you did, with me, right? You sent me some questions last week, so I knew exactly what to, expect. That solidifies our relationship. I'm feeling valued and heard and, ready to have a great conversation. Following up, having all those things is where the business owner needs to put their focus. And they really need to outsource the rest because people go to school to be audio engineers. People go to school to be graphic designers. People go to school to be good copywriters. This idea that you're going to do it all well in any kind of timely manner is just incorrect. And I think that a lot of businesses don't understand that when you try to do those things by yourself, you're actually cheapening your brand. You're doing a great disservice to your brand, especially if you have a high ticket item. If your average close is 10K or higher, you can't put out bad graphics. You can't put out bad videos. You can't put out bad content it literally works against you. So I think starting with like, it doesn't have to be a huge time consumption thing, but what is the ROI? What is your average client spend? If you did 15 episodes and you could close one deal, well, then it doesn't seem like a huge time commitment at all, right? It was absolutely worth it. So I think it's perspective.
And also, I think in this medium, podcasting content itself, that tends to stay around a while, right? I mean, I listen to podcasts that have, 250, 300 episodes. And some of the early ones that I listen to, they're a bit rough. Even some of ours, we took us about a year to decide to take on podcasting because it is so involved, and working with an outside partner that's already got that knowledge can set you leaps ahead of other people that are maybe just getting into it. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, why reinvent the wheel? Podcasting is not the same as doing live streams or covering an event or something like that. So even large companies like the Atlantic Council, we produce all their podcasts because they recognize that even though they have an A/B team, they're doing live streams all the time. It's very different than a podcast, and it would have to move through too many different departments. And so it doesn't really make sense. It's like, let's just hire, a podcast production company to do all of our podcasts, even though they have an entire team of people.
If you folks can hear the rain in the background, Molly she's having some storms down there in Costa Rica, and that comes with the territory. We lost a little bit of signal there, Molly. Just we're smoothing this over.
I had a feeling.
Yeah, it's okay. It's no problem. I got the gist of your response. Let's move on to the next one about not all businesses will translate what they can do into an interesting podcast, right? I mean, it's a medium that will work for specific kinds of businesses. Are there businesses that are most appropriate and a good candidate for driving business from a podcast?
I think any business could benefit from a well-crafted podcast when really dialed into who they're recording and why. I think a lot of bigger brands have made the mistake in thinking that because somebody loves their product, they're going to love their podcast. Like, I love Slack, never going to listen to a Slack podcast. It's never going to happen. I work all day. The last thing I want to do is cozy up with a Slack podcast at the end of the day. So, would that be a crowd favorite? Probably not. Could Slack get in front of a lot of really amazing people and do excellent business development and tee a lot of people up for their pipeline by having them on their podcast? 100%. Is it great sales enablement tool? 100%. Are consumers going to listen to a Slack podcast? Probably not. Right? It's just, so I think being really clear on, again, what is the goal and how would that benefit a company? Because a lot of times it's not just about talking about your products. In that case, an internal podcast would be better, right? Like if you have a big insurance company, maybe having an internal podcast would save you so much more time. It'd be much more effective for your internal team, where the interviewing of the potential guest is really more business development. And then you're not as concerned about downloads and things like that. So it really kind of just depends. For a small business, though, it's going to be rare for them to pick up business because somebody listened to their podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It just is. What's far more likely is interviewing 15 people that fit your ICP and nurturing those relationships. You're far more likely to close a deal than you are from people just tuning in.
How can podcasting help business owners cultivate those relationships? Do you have some examples of clients that have those because of my podcast business wins kind of stories? Have you got any success stories there?
For sure. One of my clients actually hired a really amazing person because that person had listened to their podcast and reached out and said, I've listened to 100 episodes. I like who you are. I like the company ethos and I'd like to work for you, which is one of those unexpected, benefits of having a podcast. In my own business, it works tremendously well. I interview CMOs on my podcast, and that leads into really great collaborative partnerships because they recognize that we're good at what we do. So I think really where it is it's all about preparation, right? If you're going to go on a podcast, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this, they get invited to be on a podcast. There's very little information. They half the time you don't even have the link the day of the recording. There's no follow up. You never know if it's live or not. Sometimes I'm scrolling through LinkedIn, I see my face, I say, oh, okay, I guess that podcast episode went live. It's like the most important part of the relationship is being completely ignored, and it's like volume, like quantity is being pushed over quality, and it's like next, and they don't even notify the guest, hey, thanks for coming on the show, hey, thanks for, oh, here's some assets, hey, by the way, can I get that meeting, can I get an introduction, would you like to see my new products, something along. There's none of that, right? There's like none of that at all. It's just more about the next episode. So I think doing things like researching your guest, doing a really nice introduction like you did for me. Most of the time people will just read whatever you send them. Communicating in advance what to expect. All of these things, what people don't realize is that what it's doing is speaking volumes about how you do business, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's something, because I'm a listener too. I'm a fan of podcasting as a medium. And I look at it the same way as if I was going to sit down and have an in-person business meeting with someone. I really do take that posture when it comes to the podcast, because everybody's going to hear it. They're going to see, we do video as a component of our podcast. They'll see how we interacted. And if it was an engaging conversation where we passed on some learnings to the audience. So you really got to go into it with that mindset of you want to end up with a good experience for both parties.
Genuinely interested in people, like be genuinely curious, like read their bio, look them up on LinkedIn, read some of their blogs, like as if you were going on a date or an important sales call. It's that's exactly it. Like get into it,
Yeah. What if I didn't want to do my own podcast for my small business? Are there other ways to benefit from guesting on other people's shows as a strategy?
There certainly is. I think podcast guesting is a great way to, number one, it's relationship building. And I don't think people talk enough about that, because these podcast hosts are like a treasure trove of contacts. They've been interviewing people that might want to do business with you. And so people really are just, it's almost selfish. They're like, I'm going to tap into their audience. And it's like, well, no, actually, they're the gatekeeper and they're the ones with all the keys to the castle. And so it's not just about impressing their audience and hoping they come over to you. It's about really nurture the relationship with that podcast host. Like, be grateful, share the content, follow up with them, ask for an introduction, ask for those referrals. That's number one. And then number two, the social proof. When other people are talking about you on LinkedIn, that's always good for business. It's one thing if you're just grandstanding and thought leadership all the time. When other people are talking about how great you are, or the gem you dropped, or the knowledge you have, that's really great. But it's not necessarily going to move the needle unless if you go on as many podcasts as you can for 90 days, you're going to see some results. If you go on one podcast a month inconsistently, it's not going to give you any results, just like any other marketing efforts.
Yeah, that point that you made there about asking for or providing a review or asking for a review. I heard a great one yesterday, and I hadn't really thought about it this way, but asking for a review on LinkedIn, really, it could be just about your experience working with me on the podcast, or but then the other element of actually sharing that review on your Google My Business site as well, and just showing the person how they can copy the contents of what they had written about you on LinkedIn and putting it on Google My Business, and just being smart about getting those reviews out there. We mentioned monetizing a podcast, and for a small business, it may be difficult initially, but let's not discount that totally. Can you talk a little bit about some of the monetization strategies podcasters could have, and how new podcasters could start generating income from their shows?
For sure. So I think from a podcaster standpoint, monetizing your podcast is extremely hard. It's just like, you see these posts from musicians who are like, Rolling Stones, and they're like, we made $27 from Spotify last month. Like, this idea that your content is going to make money is tricky, right? Especially when you're talking about Spotify and people like that. They're just really not trying to give up any money. So your traditional like spins, right? Like in the radio world, if you get X amount of spins or plays or broadcasts, you get X amount of dollars. Well, your numbers got to be really high for you to get any kind of money on like having ads on your podcast and things like that. You got to be reeling in some serious downloads. And so if you're not trying to be a podcaster, I wouldn't really focus on that. I think if you are trying to build a personality, you could always go for sponsorships, direct sponsorships, like who is listening to my podcast, who else is trying to reach those people, and let me go directly to them and say, listen, my audience is exactly your target audience. Like, I could produce the content and you can be the sponsor, yada, yada, right? And so that's a great look. But in general, I'm kind of opposed to this idea of monetizing a podcast, because the podcast is the monetization tool. It is the business development tool. And like, you're not going to make money off your downloads, but if you interview the right people and you nurture that relationship and you follow up with them and you close that deal, you're going to make a lot of money off of closing one of those deals than you are off of getting paid for your downloads. Right. Even these, and right now it's like an absolute bloodbath in the podcast industry. Even just over the last week, the databases have all changed. So podcasts that were showing that they had 4,000, 3,000 downloads are showing 132 downloads per episode, because what's happened is, the whole Apple automatic download thing got taken away. And so all these huge contracts with these big guys, like big famous podcasters and stuff, it's an absolute bloodbath, because Apple was automatically downloading the podcasts onto the people's phones, but that doesn't mean they were listening to them. So this means the ad industry is on, its head. All these big contracts are getting obliterated because they don't have 10 million downloads or 10,000 downloads an episode. It's really like 1,000 people actually listening. So this idea of like getting lots of numbers and being big in that, and those companies, keep in mind, are putting tons of money behind those podcasts. They're paying to play. They're doing ads, billboards, bus stops, all that, and they're still not getting those numbers. So to me, it's like, you don't monetize the podcast. The podcast is money. The podcast is the money tool. It's not about monetizing it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think people do business with people that they know, like, and trust. I've gone to conferences that Mike Stelzner put on, his social media conference. I know, like, and trust Mike. I know, like, and trust Anne Handley. I wanted to go to a conference. I heard her. I listened to the Marketing Profs podcast. I know, like, and trust that organization. So that was business for them, and the value that I get on a weekly basis is marketing training and thought leadership from them. So it can materialize in lots of other different ways. How do we grow the audience? What are your top tips for growing a podcast audience? Is it literally posting, the short reels on Instagram? Is it posting on Twitter? How do you get people to listen and subscribe?
If I'm being fully honest, I don't really encourage people to worry about that too much in my space, because, the downloads aren't going to close deals. However, we make content that's meant to be seen. And so we make SEO rich content, and we make lots of social media graphics for that purpose, right? But the trick is make good content. If you interview somebody and they're $1 million company or $10 million company, and you have a bad graphic of them, they're not going to share it. So everybody knows people on LinkedIn that are like, new podcast alert, right? And most of the time you're probably just ignoring it, right? New podcast alert is not bringing me in. If it says something like how to overcome anxiety, or how to double your revenue this year, or how to do this, right? You're more likely to be interested in. Now, if it's somebody you follow on LinkedIn saying, hey, I was on this podcast and we're talking about how to double your revenue, now I'm even more interested, right? So I think like the short answer is SEO rich. Like, take that transcription of your podcast, turn it into blog posts, turn it into newsletters. Like, it's all about SEO. Rewrite all your descriptions and all your metadata. Get rid of all the adjectives. Tell ChatGPT no more adjectives, no more mavens, no more maestros. I've never met so many mavens and maestros of marketing in my whole life until I started using AI, right? It's focus on keywords, less on adjectives, and really get your SEO content. But The social proof is not going to come from me posting. Heartcast Media has 20,000 followers on Facebook. When I post stuff on there, you know how many people see it? 7 or 8, maybe if I'm lucky, right?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, right? But you know what does get attention? When I interview somebody, I write a thoughtful post about it. I tag them and their company on it. It has a nice graphic that they're interested in sharing on their own LinkedIn profile. The video of them looks good. The video clips of them make them look smart. They're a lot more likely to share that content on their profile, which is going to get me a lot more visibility in the business world, exactly where I want, than me focusing on the downloads, right? So I think it's always going to boil down to that relationship, but also producing content. And we've all been there. Like when you agree to speak for something and they send you the graphic and you think to yourself, oh, Jesus, I'm not putting this anywhere near my social media. This is terrible, right? This is, and we've all been there. Or it doesn't match the aesthetic, or it just, it doesn't look like the image you're trying to portray. We have brand guidelines and marketing people. So you really got to create something that's high quality if you want people to reshare it, because nobody wants to bring their brand value down with your bad content or your poorly designed graphic because you wanted to save some money on Fiverr, right? So I think it's just like anything. It's like showing up to a business meeting in workout clothes. It's the same thing. You really want that content to be high end and to match the caliber of the people that you're interviewing. And that's how you're going to grow your audience. And that's probably the audience you want. Like, I don't really care if people on iTunes are downloading my podcast. I really don't. I'm far more interested in the people on LinkedIn, understanding that I have a pretty revolutionary way of looking at, podcasts and business development. And I'm showing people exactly how I do it. And that to me has much more value than looking at my RSS feed and saying, oh, we got 500 downloads on that episode. Because at the end of the day, those downloads is a one-way street. You can't communicate with people on downloads. You can communicate with them on LinkedIn. You know what I mean? It's immediate feedback. On iTunes, it's like if you want to reach those subscribers, you got to make another podcast. So and then iTunes isn't even paying you for that. You're building their database, giving them all this data, all this information, all this demographics that they're making gabillions, and that's a technical term, of dollars off of us, right? And they don't give the creators anything. So to me, I think don't even focus on growing your audience, focus on growing your influence, focus on growing your Rolodex, and think about maybe not just interviewing people you want to do business with, but like who are aggregators, who are people that have lots of people. Like I love working with fractional CMOs and interviewing them for my podcast because I know they probably have a couple of clients and they might want to refer me to those clients. And maybe they have past clients and maybe they have future clients. So that's not just one person that might hire me. They could bring me 5 or 6 clients from that one person. So I think thinking along those lines and not thinking about, people like to talk about failure. So I'm going to start a podcast about failure. No, not at all. Like your podcast is a great example. You're giving like really great actionable business, information. This is this interview right now. People can take this, they can start a podcast, they can fill their pipeline, they can see real results. This makes a lot of sense for Experian. It's right on brand. It's right on target. Your audience wants to know this content. But if you're an insurance broker, why are you interviewing people about failure?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think you made an excellent point there also on growing your influence and really just making that the focus. And that's really what we try to do here on Small Business Matters. We didn't really have a true sense of, who that audience was that's running credit reports on their business. And we wanted to have more conversations about the actual small businesses and have folks like you come on and share your insights. Let's switch a little bit to the legal side of podcasting. How important is it for a small business to have contracts in place for their podcast related to who owns it, where it's hosted, etc.? Have you got any case studies where business owners hadn't covered their bases legally?
No. Not a single one. And I work with I work with government agencies. I work with people who are attorneys. I work with the number one largest law firm in Washington, D.C. It's really, it's sort of implied. It's our content. You're coming on our show. I mean, you could have them like do a terms and conditions maybe on a booking form or something. But I think it's pretty much well known. I think more people are concerned about maybe having first right of approval on the content. Like, some of my clients are talking about like, relations in the Middle East and like, very touchy subjects at certain times. Right. And so sometimes people might want to review it first before it goes out, especially lawyers, right? Like they really want to like triple check everything before it goes out.
Yeah.
But I would say in regards to, and I see this a lot in the podcast groups, people say, I'm going to trademark my podcast. I'm like, hey man, why don't you get through 20 episodes first and then get back to me, because unless you're going to be doing your podcast show live and making merchandise and stuff, you don't need a trademark. That's a waste of time and money. And I mean, you could create just a little form that says like, hey, but I've been on countless podcasts. We've produced countless podcasts, and I would say maybe 3% of people have a legal form.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about the scenario where it's a person that wants to have this podcast. I've heard some horror stories about folks that had someone managing the podcast for them, like the feed, and where the podcast took off, but then the person was, no longer with the organization, or that they lost possession of the podcast. And I think as a business owner, I would want to make sure, I would want to view that as an asset of the company. And, because there's an audience that would come with that if I did want to sell the company down the road. I was just thinking about it from that perspective.
From that perspective, absolutely. I mean, we're really big on that because a lot of companies popped up and they're like, well, we own your content and we'll put ads on it, and then we get paid for some of the downloads. We're the opposite. Everything is in our client's name, and it should always be that way. You should own your RSS feed. You should have access to all these things. And it's another reason to like, don't hire somebody on Fiverr. Like I get the inclination, but like you can find very affordable services that are not predatory. And like if you've hired somebody on Fiverr, like next week they might not be there. And so you should never just like hand over the keys to the castle to anybody. And so I would definitely encourage you, if you're going to hire an agency, to be very clear about that. Because there are some companies out here pulling some tricks, for sure. But I think it's probably the small, unregulated editors, because there's, again, these misnomers are everywhere. But a lot of people think that just because you can edit audio means you're good at marketing or means you're good at strategy. And it's like, listen, you can find a million people all over the world that can edit your audio and edit your video. That does not mean that they understand the key points in each conversation that matter most to your audience. And all. Those are very different worlds, right? And so the best thing you can do to protect yourself legally is not work with individuals, not work with people like that, and then be really clear when you sign your contract. Hey, this is my content. I own it. And I want, like we build websites for people and we send them an email and we say, here's your login and password, but for the love of God, please do not log in and touch the website. But you have it. You have access to it. It is yours, but just fill out this form if you want us to edit it. But we always make sure that they have a login and password and they can do anything that they need at any time because it's their website and they own it. And so it's the same thing with podcasts. They have access to their RSS. They have access to the Trello board. They have access to everything. If they stop, if they move to somebody else, happy to do it. There's nothing we even need to release because we don't own it in the first place.
Well, Molly, this has been so enlightening, and it's really got me thinking about the many powerful ways that small businesses can grow and scale through podcasting and grow in their influence. Tell our audience where they can reach you and start a conversation.
Absolutely. Well, you can check out the website if you want to see our, offers and things like that. Heartcast Media. It's a great place to see our content and what it looks like. Heartcastmedia.com. And then, of course, on LinkedIn, I'm always open to chat. I love doing discovery calls with people and strategy sessions because a lot of times, even 20 minutes with somebody, I can really kind of, one of my favorite quotes is, you can't read the label from inside the jar. And so, if anybody's thinking about a podcast, but they're just like, I understand it could be valuable, but I'm having a hard time connecting the dots to see exactly how that would work, hit me up. I'm happy to spend some time with you and help you figure that out, whether you hire us or not. I'm really good at the branded podcast speed dating, if you will. It's one of my favorite things to do. So.
Great stuff. Thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights with us, Molly. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. For any resources mentioned on the show today, visit our show notes over at Experian.com/SMB Matters, and be sure to subscribe to our blog for articles and tips to improve your business credit. And if you're new to the show, be sure to follow us. And if you love it, let your friends know or tag us on Instagram. We are at ExperianBIS, #SMB Matters. Drop us an honest review and rating on whichever platform you're listening on. And if small businesses matter to you, shop local or reward them with your business online. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Small Business Matters podcast.